Hi everyone, it's Heidi with Modern Bygone, and today we're going to be talking about English paper piecing. We're going to talk about how to prepare your fabric. I'm going to be using iron-on English paper piecing templates, and then we're going to talk about how to hand sew most effectively. If you find the video interesting and you want to see some more, don't forget to hit like and subscribe down below, and also hit that bell icon so that you'll get notified when my videos are uploaded. Let's jump into it. For today's video, we're going to be doing some English paper piecing, which is a really old way of sewing, hand sewing, and using geometric shapes to be able to create a larger pattern. You're going to need a pair of scissors. I use some small embroidery scissors. You're going to need some thread. You'll need some fabric. Mine is already pre-cut into 2.5 by 2.5 inch squares. For this project, I'm using English paper piecing iron-on pieces. They come in a variety of shapes. They're produced by Hugs and Kisses, and I'll put a link down below to where I got those online. I like using the iron-on because it doesn't move around and shift as much as the paper pieces do. You can, of course, just use regular paper. That is originally how it was done, and you can reuse your paper pieces. These iron-ons aren't reusable. They are interfacing that stay in the fabric once you have finished the project. So you will have to buy more of them. For me, it's worth it. I like to be able to use the iron-on so that they don't shift and move while I'm trying to hand stitch them together. So today we're going to talk about how to make a hexagon flower. You can then use these hexagons to create much larger pictures and images. A quick search on Pinterest or Google will give you lots of hexagon ideas for being able to make the patterns. Again, these iron-on paper pieces, they come in all sorts of different shapes, different sizes, things like that. So you'll be able to use them to be able to make all sorts of different patterns. I've already taken my iron and I've ironed on my iron-on fusible paper pieces. And like I said in the introduction, I like to use the iron-on ones because they don't shift as much as the paper. I can just be able to pre-do a bunch of them. When you are using the paper pieces, there are lots of videos out there with tutorials on how to do that. They can sew baste them in, they glue baste them in, they do lots of different ways. But the iron-on isn't very expensive, and I actually prefer to use it. The other item that you're going to be needing today is, of course, a needle and thread. Now, this hand sewing needle is just a little hand sewing needle. Use whichever ones you prefer. I'm all about not going out and buying things that I don't necessarily need when I've got stuff on hand. This just happens to be a regular sewing needle. I can't even tell you what size it actually is because I don't have the original packaging anymore. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get a piece of thread. Now when you're taking out your thread for your paper piecing, color isn't very relevant. If you're careful with your small stitches, you shouldn't see them too much. You can see it a little bit in some of my seams, but not too much. I prefer to use purple just because it's one of my favorite colors. So you're going to go ahead and you're going to take about 1 arm's length worth of thread. Anything longer than that, and I find that it ends up tangling a lot more. When you're threading your needle, remember, bring your needle to your thread, not your thread to your needle. It's a lot easier to thread when you bring your needle to it. Go ahead and just bring that in and through. You're going to be pulling that so that it's in half. Match up your 2 ends. And the way that I put my knot at the end is I loop it around my fingers. And then I take my fingers out of the loop. And then I wrap my tail around the outside of that loop 3 times. So I bring it in and out. That's 1. In and out. That's 2. In and out. That's 3. And then I just put it around a finger just so that I can keep it from knotting up where I don't want it to. Bring it up to the end and then just pull until that loop is done. And you end up with a nice tight knot at the end of your thread. In order to baste the sides of your fabric down, we're going to start by folding our fabric down around that paper piecing template that's inside. And we're just going to be putting some really tiny little stitches in at the corners. If you look on the back of my hexagon flower, you'll see I didn't trim off any of the ends. I simply just ironed it nice and flat. And now when I go to stitch this onto a project, those will just be inside. No big deal. So we're going to be basting our fabric down at each of the corners to be able to hold its shape. And then once we have that, we'll take our hexagons and we'll actually start sewing them together. In order to baste, we're just going to start at one of our flat sides, and I'm going to fold my fabric over the edge of our template. I'm going to use my fingernail just to kind of crease it a little bit. And then I'm going to fold the next edge over. And I actually like to go from right to left. It's just a personal preference. And you end up with your fabric folded over like that. Now, I'm going to take my needle and thread, and I'm just picking up ever so small amount of fabric, both under the edge of the fold and over the edge of the fold. And the reason we're trying not to go all the way through, you'll see I haven't gone through onto the front fabric there. We're just grabbing the tiniest bit of fabric on both sides of that fold so that we can hold it in place. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to do it one more time to be sure to hold that fold in place. Again, I'm trying not to catch that front, so you can see that I've caught my front a little bit right there. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my needle back out and reinsert the needle, trying not to catch the front of the fabric because I don't want my basting to cause dimples at the corners. Pull my thread around so it doesn't loop around the corners and pull it tight. And then I'm going to move to my next corner, which is right here. Again, I'm going to fold that fabric down along the flat edge. Use my fingernail a little bit to crease. Grab just the tiniest amount of fabric under the fold. Come up to the tiniest amount of fabric over the fold. Make sure I haven't grabbed anything on the front. We don't want to dimple our corners. And you don't want to pull so tight that your corners come together. We want our hexagons to lay flat. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that back so that it's nice and flat. And I'm going to do my second stitch. Checking to make sure I didn't catch the front. Pull through. And that corner is now secured. We're just going to work our way all the way around that hexagon, securing each corner with 2 stitches. Again, don't pull it so tight that we fold it. We don't want our corners to pucker. Second stitch to hold it in place. Move to the next corner. Fold along the flat edge of our template. For our last flat edge, we're going to do first this corner. And this one's kind of close to the edge of my fabric, so I'm going to be careful to make sure I get it folded down. And for our last corner, I still want my fold to be folded this direction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and I'm going to take that last flap of fabric, I'm going to fold it down, and then I'm going to overlap my first fold, because this was my first fold here, and I'm going to stitch that last corner into place. And now I just need to knot my fabric. What I like to do is I like to make a loop with my fingers, and I'm going to wrap the thread around my needle 1, 2, 3 times, pull it through, and I'm using my fingers to keep that loop so that it doesn't twist up on itself while I pull it closer and it doesn't get caught on anything. And I'm just slowly but surely pulling my thread through. It's okay if it feels like it's tugging. Once my loop gets a little bit small, I'm going to take a fingernail, I'm going to put it right on top of that knot where I want it to stay. I'm going to pull my loop. Now I have a nice tight knot up against the fabric. No worries about it being out where it doesn't belong. And our paper hexie is basted. Now, once you have enough of these basted, you can actually start to sew together your hexagon flower. So I'm going to take my sewing needle, same thread, same needle. I'm going to do that knot again, wrap it around my fingers to make a loop, wrap the tail 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Pull the thread so that knot stays up at the top, and pull my knot tight. Now, for this flower I had blue in the center and I had red around the outside. For this one, I want my hexagon flower to have red in the center and blue around the outside. So I'm going to take my 2 hexagons and I'm going to place them right sides facing. And I'm going to start on a side that doesn't have a knot. And I'm just going to line those corners up. If you want to use a clip to hold them together, you certainly can. I generally don't use a clip because I find it easy enough to be able to just hold the pieces together. I'm going to take my needle and thread, and I'm going to start right at the corner. Now, when you're sewing your hexagons together, you only want to catch the very top of that fabric, just the tiniest amount, just a few threads on each one. The more threads that you grab, the more likely you are to see stitches. So you can see stitches here a little bit in some of mine because I grabbed too far down, a little bit too far down on this one. This one looks pretty good. I did a pretty good job of only grabbing right along the edge. And we're just going to go into the corners. And we're going to whip stitch, which means we're going in one side and out the other. And we're creating a loop over the top of our seam. I'm just going to go back again. I'm coming in from the side facing me, going out away, and pulling up. I'm also happen to be catching the threads from my knot. That's fine. It's not going to hurt anything. Grab a few threads at the top of each piece. And whip stitch it together. And you're just going to continue across the entire top of that seam. making very, very tiny, tiny stitches. The wider the stitch length that you create, the more likely it is that you'll see your stitches on the other side, and the less secure your piece will be. I really like using paper piecing as a traveling project. Everything that you need is fairly small and fits into a project bag really, really easily. It's nice to sit down and just baste a whole bunch of your hexagons together. And then once you have a few of them basted, you can start to sew them together for your flowers. And then once you have your flowers, you can start sewing them together for a bigger project. Or for this one in particular, I'm going to be appliquing it onto a project bag as a decorative feature. And you can see it doesn't take very long to go across the seam. Just grabbing the very top of that fabric and stitching all the way across, corner to corner. Make sure your corners stay lined up. It's important your corners stay lined up because once you have finished this seam, you're going to open it up and match it up to other hexagons. So you want your corners to match up as closely as possible. And one more stitch right in the corner. And I'm ready to put in my knot. Same way I did before when I was basting. Wrap it 1, 2, 3 times around the needle. Use your fingers to hold that loop open so it doesn't twist on itself, and then a fingernail to hold your knot in place. And just pull your thread through. And then you've got your knot. Nice and close to your fabric right there. And I've got my first seam. You're just going to work your way around your center hexagon. So this will be my center. These are my outside ones. And I'm just going to do this one. We'll go here. And then once it's all seamed up, it'll flip up and we'll be able to seam them together. And you'll end up with your lovely hexagon flowers. I did give this a nice press with a hot iron to get it to flatten out a little bit. It wanted to curl, not a big deal. And then when I go to put it on a project bag, I will just stitch around or embroider. I haven't really decided what I want to do with it yet. But that was my nice and quick English paper piecing tutorial. That was my English paper piecing tutorial. I hope that you enjoyed it. Again, don't forget, hit that subscribe button and the like if you liked this video. I'll be posting crafting tutorials every weekend, and make sure that you check in on Instagram and Facebook at Modern Bygone. We'll be checking in later today with a video with my magical fishbowl that tells us what next week's tutorial is going to be. If you are interested in a particular project or a particular tutorial that you would like to see me do, please make sure you comment down in the comment section down below, and I will add it into our random drawing to see what tutorial I'm going to be doing for next week. I hope you enjoyed my paper piecing tutorial and have a good day. Happy crafting!